Alan Winfield speaking, and welcome to this webinar. I'm delighted that you can join us. So I'm just going to speak for a very few minutes to introduce the topic, first of all, which is machine ethics. This webinar accompanies a special issue of the Proceedings of the IEEE. You can see the front cover on this slide, focused on both the technology and the governance of ethical machines. That's broadly what we call machine ethics. So as my colleague at the Proceedings, Vaishali, just mentioned, we have a number of speakers, and let me just briefly introduce our distinguished speakers. So all of the speakers have articles in the special issue. Of course, we couldn't have all speakers because it would take too long. So we have a wonderful selection subset of speakers representing the, if you like, the broad spectrum of articles in the special issue. So we have Professor Jean-François Bonnefon, who is the research director at the Toulouse School of Economics in France, although I understand that Jean-François is currently on sabbatical at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. We then have our second speaker will be Dr. Louise Dennis. Louise is a lecturer in computer science and researcher, in fact, in machine ethics at the University of Liverpool in the UK. And in fact, Louise and I have been collaborating on research in machine ethics for some years. Our third, in fact, not a speaker, but a guest editor, along with myself and the other two guest editors are Professor Jeremy Pitt and Professor Vanessa Avers, who will not be on this webinar. But let me focus on Katina Michael. Professor Michael is professor and director of in the School of, let me see, the School for the Future of Innovation in Society at Arizona State University. And in fact, I understand that right now, Katina is actually running a workshop in Washington, and her workshop participants are actually participating in the webinar as we speak. Our third speaker is Professor Sarah Spiekermann, who is a professor and chair of the Institute for Information Systems and Society at Vienna University of Economics and Business in Austria. Vienna, I should say that Sarah, Professor Spiekermann, has also been involved in, for some years with the IEEE ethics initiative, from which, in a sense, this special issue on machine ethics has emerged. And then just finally, a very brief word about myself. I'm the lead guest editor, and it was a privilege to do that of this special issue of the Proceedings of the IEEE. I am a co-founder of the Bristol Robotics Laboratory and a professor of robot ethics. So after those very brief introductions, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, Jean-François Bonnefon.
Perfect. Thank you, Alan. Let me just...
Thank you. Perfect. So thanks. So in this article for the special issue, we focused on the ethics of autonomous vehicles, specifically self-driving cars. And we started with a rather uncontroversial position, which is shown on the next slide. If you could, yeah, okay. So this controversial position is that in order to be allowed on the road, self-driving cars should save lives. They should be safer than humans. Now, once you accept this starting point, you need to solve a difficult question. Fine, self-driving cars should save lives, but whose lives? Because the point is that self-driving cars will not eliminate all accidents. They cannot save everyone. So we need to decide which accidents we allow them to have and which road users they should save in priority. Now, this question has been discussed so far mostly in the context of so-called trolley problems. So here's an example on the next slide. Right, in this example, the self-driving car is in a critical situation where it's about to run over and kill 5 pedestrians. And its only option to save them is to swerve and to kill another pedestrians in the other lane. Now, typically at this point, I would ask you what the car should do. But is this question really useful? You see, trolley problems have attracted immense attention, but with this attention came criticisms. And the most common criticism that you hear is that these problems are too unrealistic to bother, that they will be so incredibly rare that we don't really need to solve them. Now, in the paper, we argue that throwing away trolley problems would be a mistake, because they help us thinking about a very real, very pressing problem that we call the statistical trolley problem. So I'm going to show you an example on the next slide. So here's the example. There's a car, and this self-driving car needs to position itself between the cyclist and the truck. Now, the closer the car gets to the cyclist, the safer is the car passenger because she or he is away from the truck, but then the cyclist is put at more risk. The closer the car gets to the truck, the safer is the cyclist, but the passenger is now at more risk. People are not going to die every time the car makes such a decision. This is not a trolley problem. But the decision made by the car in this situation, aggregated over thousands of vehicles driving millions of miles, is going to result in different accident profiles at the end of the year. So the car is not trading the lives of cyclists and passengers right now, but it's trading lives statistically. And we need to decide how it is going to do that. What we need to decide is what would be an acceptable distribution of accidents across road users, and how to regulate cars, self-driving cars, so that they deliver this desirable statistical profile of accidents. We've been there before. Look at this on the next slide. So this is a bull bar. Bull bars are supposed to protect you against large animals, but you used to see them in cities. I say you used to see them because we have now banned them across the European Union. The reason behind this regulation is that bull bars shifted risk too much in the direction of pedestrians for little safety benefits to the passengers. This shift was deemed unethical, and bull bars were banned. That means that there is a precedent for looking at features of the car that shift risk from one category of road user to another, and to regulate them when we find the shift unethical. Therefore, we can do for software what we did for hardware. We can regulate how cars are programmed with the goal of reaching an acceptable, ethical, statistical distribution of accidents across categories of road users. Now, this will not be easy, so consider the simplified example on the next slide. How do we want cars to shift risk between passengers and pedestrians? We could start at the center of the line. Status quo. We say, whatever the self-driving cars do, they should kill pedestrians and passengers at the same relative rate as now. But there is no ethical ground for this decision. The current traffic accident statistics are not good simply because they are. They do not result from a thoughtful deliberation. They just reflect the impulsive actions of human drivers. So maybe we want to change that. But if we allow cars to shift risk away from passengers and to pedestrians, we risk community outrage because pedestrians will think this shift is unfair. Now, if we force cars to shift risk away from pedestrians and toward passengers, the risk is that people will not adopt self-driving cars because they do not see where their interest is. Now, we do not offer a solution to this dilemma in the article, but we do argue that this is the dilemma we need to solve, and we need to solve it sooner rather than later. And I'm done. Thank you.